So I've been asked to give an industry perspective on this aspect of herbal medicine regulation or education. Like Greer, I think both are important, largely because it's a complex business. If you do it properly, you're involving lots of people who are certainly very well educated, they need to be, and there are many different aspects to delivering a herbal medicine. If you're a practitioner, you have to obviously know your stuff in terms of the diagnosis and treatment. And if you're a developer like myself, a company, then you need to produce that medicine to the same quality every time and make sure in the first place that the claims you're making are actually true. So it's a complex business, and I'm not going to go through Chinese medicine, but there are many aspects that they have to take into account. Typical pharmacology type stuff. Actually, this is really interesting for a pharmacologist like myself, because the Chinese many years ago were doing some really good pharmacology in looking at antagonism with chemicals in the plants and mutual assistance, as they called it, mutual reinforcement, suppression, and incompatibility, as well as toxicity. So a lot of complex concepts that they were pulling together and doing it in a very sophisticated manner. How on earth they came up with it all, I don't know, but they did a good job of it. Oh, isn't that awful? I think all my slides are going to be like that. It's like watching it in 3D without the glasses. God knows what that says. Any ideas? What Greer made the point about is that there are certain regulations that we have. There's a traditional herbal medicines directive. Now, for a company like myself, what we're doing is coming up with new medicines. These are modified versions of the traditional formula. The first simplest registration, as I put there, really doesn't work for us, because you can't have novelty. If you have novelty, you can't develop it through this traditional herbal route. So this is a standardized system that everyone has to comply to. And if you're going to come up with something novel, it doesn't fit into this pathway. So you have some other choices. You can either take it down the food route, which is the next complexity that you have to deal with. There's a new regulation out called the Nutritional and Health Claims. It came into being in January of this year, 2010. And it allows you to start to make nutrition and health claims on a product that's a food. Now, you've seen this in the past. You've seen foods that have these wondrous claims on it. Makes your hair grow, makes your skin look 20 years younger, and so on. And what happened in Europe is the regulators decided they really needed to get a grip with this process of mislabeling effectively. And so they came up with the nutrition and health claims. It's an excellent piece of, in my opinion, legislation, very well thought out and very well enacted at the moment. The process of evaluation is absolutely transparent, and they do it in a very clear manner. And I think they do it with some very good scientists behind the regulatory panel evaluating these. So that's a neat way of taking a Chinese medicine through the next layer, which is the food route. Lots of traditional herbalists don't like that because they think it's degrading their medicine into a food. But from a company perspective, we don't really care what it is, what it's called, as long as we can put it onto the market and the claims that we're making are true and that people can actually benefit from it. So that's the important concept from our part. Quality, safety and health benefit are the important aspects. It's not a medicine, and you can't make medicinal claims, but you can make health benefit claims. Moving on to botanicals, this is a US-centric regulation where they've moved the pharmaceutical regulations and said, okay, the pharmaceutical regulations are really geared for single chemicals, and what we need to do is make it easier to develop complex mixtures, and they came up with botanical regulations. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about the food aspect, because we took a product through this food route initially as a medicine, and we took it through the regulations initially as a medicine, and then we switched at the end and put it on the market as a food. And I'll take you through that. I really apologise for these slides. Awful, isn't it? So this was regulational education, complex regulatory environment. We have lots of different regulations, lots of people involved. You need a lot of expertise. You need to analyze your product. You need to make sure that the whole of the supply chain is regulated and controlled in a big way. And you need to get all your stakeholders in that supply chain singing from the same hymn sheet as well. So I'm going to take you through a product which is, it's dropped off the end as well. It's a 3-plant product, contains peony, glycyrrhiza and rehmannia. This was derived from a traditional Chinese medicine. Originally this was a 10 to 20 plant formula that was used for eczema. And eczema is a condition which is largely an allergic reaction initially, followed by a chronic inflammation. And it's cyclical. The chronic inflammation makes the allergy worse as well, and it weakens the immune system. So if you're going to develop a product in this area, it needs to be anti-allergic, it needs to be anti-inflammatory. And the Chinese had come up many years ago with this very neat little formula of 10 to 20 herbs. Some of them are listed there: clematis, dictamnus, glycyrrhiza, ladyborrelia, ophtherium, peony, potentiella, Schizum peter, rehmannia and tribulus. And what we did is we took initially from 20 down to 10, and we developed that for children in eczema, and then we took 3 plants and developed it as a veterinary product, as a food. And I'll take you through that. So the key aspects we're looking at is modulating the immune system, and therefore we have to control the whole manufacturing process of these 3 plants individually, and then we have to take them through toxicology studies to make sure it's safe, and then we have to take them into the clinic and do clinical trials to make sure that it works. So you have the quality, safety and efficacy aspect all sewn up, and then you have to put that together and send it to the regulators. This was the original efficacy we had with our first product. It's called Zemaphyte. 10 different plant extracts. This was tested Great Ormond Street. David Atherton was one of the key investigators, and he showed very nicely that if you have steroid-resistant eczema in these kids, and you can see that poor chappie in the top panel with very bad eczema. He's on steroids. He's got a moon-shaped face because of the high-dose steroids. After he was on Zemaphyte for a matter of weeks, his skin cleaned up very, very nicely, and he's a happy chappie. And this occurred in many, many different cases where this was a steroid-resistant eczema. They were on high-dose steroids, still wasn't working, put them on the Chinese medicine, worked superbly. This was a double-blind study, and the way it was a crossover study. In fact, you can see that initially 2 groups were given either placebo or the Zemaphyte, and we looked at surface damage and we looked at erythema. And after a few weeks, we swapped them over, did a washout, and you can see the placebo didn't work at any time, and Zemaphyte worked really well. And we did about 441 patients all in all, and very clearly showed this worked. The problem was this was 10 different plants, and as a company, we couldn't afford to carry on doing this because we had to control every single aspect of each of those plants. And it would have been phenomenally expensive if we carried on doing that. But we did show very nicely it worked. So we proved a principle. But then we had to figure out a way of developing a product that we could afford to make, and that we could control every aspect of that supply chain through to the clinic.